Antia Brody, welcome to the show. How's everything with you two?
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, doing good.
Amazing.
Excited.
Look, I'm so excited and humbled to have you on the show. The reason being is we've had in the past a lot of relationship coaches which focus on the connection when the spark's been had and something's moving forward, but we've never really had the focus when it comes down to the single aspect of a human. So I really can't wait to jump into this area with you two. With you guys and what you focus on, I know earlier in this conversation and obviously doing my research on you two, you've got quite an interesting story yourself. And the thing that I love about how you two came together is you were both individual coaches in the feminine and the masculine area. So before we jump into this, I want to know more about you two. How did this all start? How did you get into this area? More to the point, you two look like the happiest couple ever. Where did you guys meet?
Like Brody said, almost every day. The happiest couple almost every day. So I grew up in Eastern Germany, and really in an emotionally absent household. So my mom was more like a disorganized attachment style, like totally unavailable, also narcissistic tendencies. And so what I really learned is sort of like, don't bother anyone, right? Who do you think you are? So I could never really create confidence within myself. And I was also like, always had this sort of like, you're nothing. You know what I mean? Your voice doesn't matter. And so because of that, I became actually really independent because obviously this was way too painful for me. And I just made sure that I don't need anyone. So I did the opposite. So I became like this little Miss Independent, went grocery shopping by the time I was 8 years old. And so, but the problem was when I started dating men, I was sort of this walking paths conflict, right? Because on the one hand, I wanted to have this deep connected long-term relationship. But then on the other hand, I was like, oh, but I don't need you, right? So you can imagine how well that went over, and so I would attract men and then they would just like drop me at a moment's notice because, of course, they were also conflicted inside of themselves. And so after many years of this sort of merry-go-round, if you will, that, of course, was very unpleasant. And I felt very rejected and abandoned and started to feel like, I don't know if there's any hope. Maybe, I don't know, maybe have like some karma or something like that. It's about me. Yeah. That's when I really got myself into UC Berkeley. So I left Germany, studied personality and attachment style theory at UC Berkeley, just really understand how that dysfunctional relationship I had with my mother, who was like saying, don't bother me, right? Directly sort of translated into dating. Because like just as a normal human being who doesn't educate themselves like ferociously, so to say, you don't necessarily make that connection, right? You think like, well, I don't know, I just need to meet the right guy, right? I hear this all the time. Like, I just need to know where to go. Right. And so, but from that moment on, life was never the same. I threw myself into workshops, seminars. My friends would always joke with me and I would always say, instead of finding me in bars and clubs on the weekend, like they would find me in weekend workshops, and so, And then, what was interesting is I started to actually work with women sort of like, I don't even want to say on the side because I never really like charged anything because I didn't even have the men, but they always came to me for advice, right? Because I'm like, Antia, you know so much, you're so knowledgeable, right? So, we did like little soulmate support groups, I called them, you know what I mean?
Amazing.
And basically my only goal was just, please don't settle. Like, don't go for the wrong guy. Even if you just stay single, that's just my goal. You know what I mean? So, and interestingly enough, what happens, Simon, is actually I ended up attending weddings and those women actually started to meet their men. And so I was like, wait, there's something up with this. Like I must have some sort of key or some code or something, right? But the problem was, of course, it still wasn't happening for me, And so that's when I hired a one-on-one mentor for myself, helped me really break through my vulnerability aspect. And we're going to talk about that today more. Like I wasn't even aware that I wasn't vulnerable. I was like, I know everything about vulnerability. I don't know what's wrong, but I wasn't expressing that. And so literally 8 months later, I met this amazing hubby hamster here right next to me. And he literally told me the first night that we met that I'm the girl of his story.
Oh, I absolutely love that. So, by story, then, Brody, let me just hear a bit more on this from a guy's point of view. So, for you, I'm presuming if it was a story, was there some form of knowing what you're after? You kind of knew what it looked like or felt like. What's your part in this?
So, because my journey was actually very similar to hers, which is pretty interesting when we met each other. But yeah, so I had also struggled with an emotionally, very controlling mother. And so I had issues when I was growing up, struggling with meeting women and connecting with people because I never wanted to be controlled by a woman ever again when I was growing up. And I never had a dating life really until I got into college. And I was actually 16 when I read my first books on connecting and dating. First book I read was called Speed Seduction when I was 16. That was my first self-help book I ever read, and that's when I started getting into it and I started learning stuff. And I was teaching my friends in high school how to get phone numbers, even though I was just kind of just doing what I learned in the book. But
we can speak after about this then.
What was that?
I said we can speak after about that.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then as I progressed, I eventually was also, when I got into college, I had my first girlfriend. She ended up dumping me. And I was very depressed for like a year and a half because I still didn't know what I was doing really. And I got in a relationship that wasn't really a great fit. But we were together for 2.5 years. She dumped me. I was very depressed. And I actually got to this point where I was had almost suicidal thoughts. Yeah. And then I finally said, okay, you know what? I'm going to actually just master this once and for all. And that's when I really started learning everything. I got my degree in communications and read hundreds of books. And basically, so what happened was I ended up hiring my own dating coach as well. And he started teaching me things, how to be better with women, how to really master relationships and my life as a man. That was one of the things I learned was my story. One of the things that he taught me. So basically what the story was is writing down exactly what I wanted in my ideal woman in the form of a story sort of, and then also my other aspects of my life. And I would read that every morning. And I was doing that for about 4 years before I met her. So that's when I met her, and we'll talk more about how we met. We actually met at a workshop in Hawaii, in Waikiki. We were both living in Waikiki at the time, or in Oahu at the time. And we met at like a spiritual self-improvement meetup group. And so we're big fans of that. Workshops as a good way to meet good singles. And so that was that night that I met her. I told her when we were standing in the parking lot later that night and the Hawaiian moon was out, and I said, wow, you're the girl from my story. And because I was like surprised, I'm like, wow, you're like everything that I had written down in my list. I just thought it was really interesting. I'm like, wow, like you're the girl from my story. So that was kind of what that was.
That's incredible. That's absolutely amazing. What I want to speak to you both about this, because listening to both sides of your story here, and it kind of falls in line with one of the first pillars of personal performance or self-development, is, am I correct in saying when you were both on your individual paths that you both had to step into being your own before this could then happen, if that makes sense?
For me, for sure, I had to really heal my codependent patterns and become more self-sourcing. As a matter of fact, the reason why I was in Hawaii wasn't to meet guys and to date them. It was actually, I was sort of in my own sovereignty, sort of like almost priestess journey, so to say, where I'm like, I'm just going to learn what it means to be in like Antia power. Like, what does that actually mean to be deliberately single versus forced single? Because it just never worked out. So I never wanted to be single. And so this was like finally that I decided, like, I'm just going to be freaking single. You know what I mean? I'm just really going to figure out who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, for me, it's a little different because I think my journey was more a journey of, I wouldn't even really call it coming into my own. I would think it's more like just mastering my own heart. Mm-hmm. And it was actually, for me, it was more about like actually letting somebody in more. Because I was actually pretty good on my own. Like I kind of handled that because of the way I grew up with my relationship with my mother. But it was more like what happened when I had this breakup is my heart really started cracking open, and I felt like I had a death of sorts actually. Like when I was having suicidal thoughts, it was actually like I kind of died in the moment. Like, and I kind of had like a bonus time. And I was reborn to actually be able to like really open my heart and be authentic and be I guess just be more real, just more open to really connecting with somebody else. And it still was a while to that journey before I met her, but that's what really started the process.
Do you think, obviously, given the line of work that you're both in, I presume you see this, is one of the first like biggest breakthroughs that people get is just being okay, just being themselves? Is that kind of like one of the first keys where people can just get comfortable and start allowing someone in or allowing themselves to be vulnerable?
I would say it's really yes, but like let me just kind of like summarize that a little bit, because what it really means is really having a healthy relationship to all of your emotions. So let's say if I was always having a resistance to my anger, to my rage, right? Like I don't know, I don't want to hurt anyone. I'm afraid of my power, right? And so I have this like negative association to it. Yeah, then I'm not really connected to myself, right? I'm not connected to all of myself. So I'm out of like a little bit avoidant when it comes to that emotion. Same is true for sadness or despair or the grief, right? If I'm like,
Yeah.
if I was raised in like a family where everything has to just follow rules and it's strict and you just kind of grow up really fast and there's not really emotions, enough time for that, right? Like then I have a negative association to that, because that means, of course, famously, that it's weak, right? So that's really what it means. It's like starting to have a positive relationship. I call it really like sort of like a positive emotional ecosystem inside
Yeah.
of yourself.
I feel it's also really about like filling up your own cup in the sense of like really building that self-esteem and that self-valuing of knowing you are the prize and really like romancing yourself and falling in love with yourself too, because that is so important. That was part of my doing my story as well, was I would have so many things in there about like, I'm awesome, I'm great, my life is awesome, my life is great, I'm always moving forward, I'm the prize, any woman would be lucky to be with me, things like that. And you just
I
cultivate
love
that
it.
over time. Because I'm a big believer in that. It's like becoming the flame, not the moth, being the sun, not the planets, and really just making yourself into like, I used to use this analogy that I love is like, think of it, I used to teach some of my clients is this as well, because what I didn't mention in the story is I'd started coaching men at some point, obviously, with this before we met, actually. I was doing online. But one of the things I would teach my clients was like, think of yourself as like, you're this beautiful mansion and you want to make it into like the most amazing mansion possible. What's that movie? Like, I didn't actually see that movie, The Great Gatsby, or like, this
Oh,
big
yeah,
great
yeah.
mansion. And then there's like the red carpet is like lined out and cars start arriving and then women just start lining up on the red carpet. Or if you're a woman, it could be men, kind of like the Bachelor, the Bachelorette, like lining up on the carpet, just wanting to come inside because it's such an amazing mansion. So like be the mansion, the mansion.
I absolutely love that. I love that. So with this then, obviously you guys will get a lot of people coming through when I presume they're going on all this dating thing and it's just not working. Things aren't sticking. They just feel that they're at a lost end with it. I'd love to know from your guys' line of work, is there like a common correlation? Do you see something? Is there like one first step that someone needs to kind of control, get in contact with, connect with, or something along the lines of that, which is usually the foundation for them then to start moving upwards or attracting that so-called person?
To actually lay down their sword and let go of control, because my women are really successful and they're CEOs and company owners and things like that, right? So they've accomplished a lot in their own life, which unfortunately is more due to their coping mechanism. So
Yeah.
meaning like there's so much they have to lose by saying, well, out of the sun, you're telling me I'm supposed to be receptive and I'm supposed to basically like be wrong. And I actually say, your ability to attract a man is directly proportional to your willingness to be wrong. Because I was wrong when I met Brody, right? Brody ended up being the man of my story and of the love of my life. He's younger than me. And I always dated guys who were like triathletes and things like that, you know what I mean? And so Brody, let's say exercise is not like his favorite thing to do in the world. So I had to be wrong, you know what I mean? Like, so if I would be like, no, I'm not wrong. Brody's a jerk, he's a workaholic, he's just like all the other guys. Then I would have just deleted, distorted, and generalized my reality so it just fits the structure.
Yeah.
This is like the very first thing, and then with that, the women have to be willing to actually like stop putting on that coping mechanism. A lot of coping mechanisms are actually making fun of it.
Yeah.
Laughing at it. And so what I'm saying is actually saying what's actually really there, because what you just said was not funny. That was actually really sad when your mom told you you're not good enough and you were 5 years old, right? So it's really like them being willing to be with that very uncomfortable feeling, which they try to protect themselves from so much.
I love that saying. We say, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? You know, it's also looking at, are you willing to let go of your preconceived notions and all that stuff? Are you willing to let go of the way you think things have to be in order to be attracting what you want?
Does this kind of fall into, because I know you two go into the whole archetype thing, does this kind of fall into that aspect?
I get like, I mean, you know, I definitely feel like that a lot of my women need some softening with their little girl, right? So a lot of them have a very strong warrioress, we call it. And the warrioress is really that part that just like gets the job done, can do hard things. But you know what? And you as a man can appreciate that too, right? There's just like no polarity. It just kind of feels like you're talking to a coworker, but there's no polarity, right? There's no tension, there's no excitement, there's no passion, there's nothing, there's no chemistry. And so that's like a big problem that those women have, you know, because they're accomplished, they're good looking, they're taking care of themselves, but yet like a lot of first dates or second dates, right? And then it doesn't go anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Or they're like attracting men into their life, but I feel like, well, I always have to make the decision. You know what I mean? Like I always have to drive the car figuratively and literally. You know, so, and I say, well, I mean, you know, like to have the antidote to that kind of protector instinct. I had a woman today and she said, you know, my question is, how can I bring out this protective instinct in men when I am an independent woman? And I was like, well, it's a complete opposite. It's a wrong question. You know what I mean? Like, because you won't. It's that simple. You know what I mean? You have to be able, so the protector instinct, that's more the wild man, I would say, right?
More the king.
More the king? I would say more the wild man, because the wild man's like really protective.
King and the wild man,
like,
but the wild man is kind of just more instinctual.
Yeah, but that's what the woman is like, wow, right? Like this is like the ultimate masculine, like.
Okay, let's maybe make this a bit easier then for the listeners at home. What actually are the 6 archetypes? Because I know when we were speaking, I was like, oh my God, I need to know these. So what are they? Is there 6 on each? Is there 6 for masculine and 6 for feminine? What's the makeup
there's
of it?
6 for each, and they're basically the same with slightly different names. So you can write these down. It's the king. Well, we'll start with the women. It's the queen, the warrioress, the lover, the priestess,
little girl,
and then the little girl and the wild woman.
Yep.
And then for men, it's the opposite. It's the king, the warrior, the lover, still the same, the magician, the little boy, and the wild man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so in all of these individual like archetypes, if we just were to quickly sum up very, very briefly, what I know this will end up being a big topic.
That's an interview in and of itself, you know.
I was gonna say, but what's the role of them? Is it for someone to identify which one they are, and then is it a case of being able to progress through, or is it owning the one that you are? What would you? Yeah. What's the mechanism?
So the best way to think about it, I like to think about it is think of it as like a wheel. So think of it like a wheel, like the wheel of life. You might have been familiar with.
Yeah.
So think of it as a wheel, and then divided into 6 sections, right? And each section represents an archetype. And some people are stronger in some and weaker in others, and stronger in this one, weaker in others. Now the goal is to get to the hub of the wheel where you're in complete balance. So it's actually balance. That's the main thing about the archetypes. It's about integrating yourself as a man or a woman into balance. So if you're really strong, for example, on the lover side, or the little boy where you like to play and you like to just enjoy pleasures and you party a lot or you go to the beach a lot, then it's about balancing out.
Familiar.
A little more guilty of that. Then it's like maybe a little more of the warrior energy or the king energy, right? Which there's different things you can do to step more into those archetypes, or the wild man, so that you're getting into balance, because then you're like a complete man, you know, you're like a complete, you can go into different ranges as needed. Different elements as needed in your life. Kind of like, I like the analogy of like James Bond. You know how James Bond, he could be like, he's driving a submarine one moment, the next he's like, playing poker in a tuxedo, and the next he's like punching some guy in the face. So he's like a wide range, you know, he's got the classy and the brutal, you know, so it's kind of like that.
So would you say then it's more of a case of you've got to know where you are and then kind of put things in place that'll bring out, like, for example, if it's a guy who might be struggling quite insecure, there's no warrior energy or whatever you want to call it, maybe going and trying like a boxing class or a martial arts thing, or shoot a gun, go and shoot a gun or throw an axe.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting into balance. Yeah, you're trying to get in touch with those parts, because usually what I found, and this is true for me when I was growing up with my mother, she had really had a lot of judgment towards the wild man. That my father was a very strong wild man, and
he still is.
He still is. You know, he actually is a very strong wild man and a strong a little boy, but and he's a strong warrior. But so my mom was very judgmental towards that part, so she was always like trying to tame that down inside of me too, and be like, no, don't do that. You got to be nice. You got to be polite. So I'd kind of repressed my own wild man. So part of my balance when I got into college and started really working on myself and going to men's groups and different things was bringing out more of my wild man, that more of like the instinctual part, you know, that just wants to eat and have sex and, you know, go do whatever he wants to do, you know, or fight people if he wants to fight people, you know, it's like very primal. So yeah, that's the balance. It's the balance, because then a woman can trust you, and the same goes for men with women. You could trust that you are really in good touch with yourself, and you're really balanced to handle anything, really, and you can handle different situations, and you're more like a complete being. You're not repressed anymore. There's nothing that's being held back out of shame or out of inattention. This
is absolutely brilliant. I absolutely love like thinking about it as well. I'm just starting to see it in different people and patterns. Yeah. But I'd love to know from a single guy, if is the power in actually knowing this or having the conversation with someone, or is there kind of like tools you'd use, or is it more a case of awareness where if you are like going onto the dating scene or things along the lines of that, where you can start to work out where someone is, for example, on their archetypes or something like that? Is that quite an important piece of this puzzle?
I think the biggest thing is like, so for my women, for example, right? Like, so they do more things that get them more into their body, because I already know that they're more in their head, right? So I just like, okay, what can you do to get more to your lover, to get more to your little girl? Which oftentimes the men that Brody has worked with, they were already in their lover and their little boy. So it's like, we always find this like sort of the opposite. And then also thinking about like, well, so think about sort of like, what's the antidote, right? So if I want to, you know, attract a queen, but then I got to step into my king, right? So if I want to have like a woman be like feminine and feel like attracted to me, then I got to step more into my wild man. So it's just really thinking for yourself, well, so what do I want? You know what I mean? Like, and then really figure out what's the antidote to that and find that part inside of myself. That's what I teach my women. So if they want a man who's more a wild man and who's more like a king, then they have to find that little girl inside of themselves, right? That wakes up that protector instinct.
Yeah. So basically, you're right. It's not just a lot of talk. What we recommend, and we have a lot of this in our course. We have a whole module on this. But what we do at the end is we give specific exercises, because that's where the really rubber hits the road. Like you were saying, going to a boxing class if you're weak in your warrior or your wild man energy, or shooting a gun. So like those embodied practices. Those embodied practices are super powerful. And sometimes we'll do this on coaching calls too with our clients. Like, if I'm coaching a woman, I'll say, you know what's missing is I need to feel like a little more of like the like I'm a bad bitch kind of energy. Like getting into like if she's really soft and really gentle, it's like, well, you need a little bit more of this. This edge would be really add some interesting spice to it, like almost like a dominatrix kind of energy, which could be more of like, that would be more of like maybe more of a priestess or a wild woman energy even. So it's like, and then you could practice it. It's almost like you're like an actor, right? You could practice stepping into that role. But what would that feel like to really be that magician, or to really be the king, or to really be a warrior, a soldier, you know, really stepping into that energy. Like I used to do acting for a while. Actually, this is where I learned some of this. I was doing acting for 2 years while I was in college. And there's so much power in that. A lot of the best actors, method actors, will actually do that before they play a role. Is they'll actually dress up as the character. They'll live like the character before they, like months before they start filming. And so it's like when you create it while you make it. It's not fake it till you make it. It's you create it while you make it, and you step into that energy, and all of a sudden it becomes a part of you. You get in touch with that, and now you are that, and now you're balanced, and now you're much more attractive.
Yeah, I think something that you just mentioned then like really hit home for me. I've been doing the Wheel of Life exercise for years now, and I'd say the majority of those areas are pretty high, but on love, it's always been the lowest, like continually. But I've always split it up. So I've always had like personal, family, social, and then it's like depth, if that makes sense. So it's always been an area where I've not really maybe prioritized it a lot. You mentioned something there which really kind of like hit home as well. It was only recently when I was like, do you know what? It was actually knowing what I wanted. And I think that was a big turning point for me. And I think when I actually think about it in terms of like social circles, I think there's a lot of the time people are going out there trying to shoot a gun at a target in a dark room, and they don't really know where they're aiming the gun. Would you say that's probably one of the biggest things that you see is a lot of people don't really know what they want, or they don't actually know what the purpose of a relationship is to them? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
like driving blind.
I think a lot of women, we talk about the list so much, that famous list, and that so many women focus more on the features
versus
in marketing
benefits.
language. We know
Oh,
that.
so like
right?
the superficial instead of the depth.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they never think about like, why is that important to me? Like, why do I want to have somebody who has a master's degree, or why do I want to have somebody who travels the world? Like, what does that provide for me? Why is that important to me? And I think that's where those singles are not spending a lot of time, right? Because, so for example, I got everything in Brody that I wanted when it comes to the benefits, but it wasn't the features that I thought that it would be. You know what I mean? So he doesn't have a PhD, for example, and I would usually broke. So I'm like, I need somebody who I can scholarly, I can have discourses with, and And he read more books than any PhD I've met. I mean, he's like he already read 22 books since January 1st. So,
I'm on a reading binge this.
Yeah.
Likewise, I was going to say I'm a pretty avid reader. I was going to say you crushed me there. That's amazing.
Yeah, I got a system now.
Yeah, or as I said, I want somebody who's 4 years older than me because, they're sort of like more towards the king and not so much like the little boy, right? But Brody was 4 years younger than me. So that was like, for the first time of my life, I found myself to be a cougar, and, so all those like little things. So if I would have said, I want to be right, I focus on my features because I never thought about any benefits. I never sat around with that. I never gained any clarity around that, right? And I think that's what so many women do. They just cut off so much potential in men, right? And because they don't even know. They don't know. They're just like, I think this is what I'm supposed to have. This is what my mom had. This is what my girlfriend has, And so I totally believe in. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the most important thing is the ultimate benefit is how you want to feel, when you're with them. And that's what I tell my men a lot too, is like focus on how you really want to feel. And I had a client in San Francisco, and he was dating this woman that he met at a speed dating event, and he had a third date with her, and he's like, well, she's really great, but the only problem is she's a vegetarian, and she's a vegetarian and she doesn't drink. And this guy's not like an alcoholic, and he's not like a massive meat eater. I'm like, wow, those are really big red flags. Just jokingly, right? But I said like, I said,
it's so the funny thing. I've literally had that conversation with someone like over dinner last night.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny.
That's funny.
So what I asked him is, I said, well, how do you feel when you're with her? And he's like, man, when I'm with her, I feel awesome. We get along so well. We have great time together. We're connecting. I said, well, how about you just keep seeing her and just see what happens? And then sure enough, they kept seeing her, and now they're married with a kid. So
incredible.
And it was boiled down to that feeling, right? How do you want to feel? And like for me, one of the big things in my list, because like I said, the story so important. Because you give you're literally, my feeling is that when you have that story, like you start to step into being the kind of man or woman that would be a good match for that, right? You're subconsciously changing yourself the more you affirm that story and the more you're feeling into it and what it would be like to have it. You're like stepping into the kind of person that would be a good match for that. And one of the things I had on my list was I really want to be connected on all levels, like mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and especially actually the mentally, because that was one thing I didn't have in my first relationship was we were physically connected, we were emotionally connected, but the mental and the spiritual wasn't really there. And I was growing a lot. I was doing a lot of personal development. She wasn't really doing that. She wasn't really interested in that. So it just was like a horrible disconnect there. And so, but when I met Antia, it was on all levels. And I was like, wow, this is cool. Every level is connecting.
Do you guys have any like quick tips or exercises we could quickly go over? Like I know, for example, from more of my female friends that when it does come down to the list stuff, that's probably where they shine the most, as in they've got a to-do list as big as that lamp. So do you guys have any kind of like exercises or something we could quickly speak about for single people who would be kind of like do you know what, maybe my list is the biggest thing that's getting in the way, or maybe I'm writing off people too early before actually seeing where it goes. Do you guys have something that we could really help with there?
Yeah.
So when a woman has like an existing list, like one thing she has to understand, okay, features versus benefits. The second one she has to understand is that there's a hierarchy, right? So for example, I could have said, so I have all this list, but you know, I want to have like a morning person and an athlete, right? But like from a hierarchical standpoint, it was pretty low. It was kind of like, it'd be cool to have, you know what I mean? But it's not gonna kill me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's fine, right? And so, but if I was an athlete, that would be like number one, right? Like I'm like, dude, this guy better be like getting up at 6 a.m. with me and training for my triathlons, right? Because otherwise we never see each other. Okay, so really understanding like what's your hierarchy? What are sort of like your must-haves? Mine was committed to spiritual growth and personal development. That was like, he had to have dark hair. He had to have blue eyes. So I'm definitely superficial when it comes to that. And I'm totally unapologetic. And I encourage every woman to be unapologetic about that. Because
can I just say, I love how you're like, a lot of the time, especially in the spiritual or the conscious leadership world, people get slammed for having like the materialistic aesthetic thing. So I love the fact that from experts in that field, like, do you know what? It's okay to still have those kind of, So I appreciate that.
Seriously, I like my one girlfriend from South Africa. She's my best friend. You know, we've been like, she's always like giving me the truth, right? And she's like, so if he has like green eyes, you're not gonna marry him? I'm like, no, it's not the one. You know? And she's like, you're crazy. You're so stubborn. And I was like, whatever, you know. And so, but I was just really clear on that because I had visions. And there was always somebody with like darker hair and like blue eyes, and there's always like this theme there, you know. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's important because I always tell my women, look, you're never gonna date another guy, so why wouldn't you date somebody that you're really physically attracted to? Because you can never be with another guy again. You know what I mean? You better be attracted to your husband because I don't know, otherwise you're really in trouble, you know. It's like it's not gonna be fair, you know.
Yeah.
So that's Brody's sitting here like he always felt like he's the present. He's the gift.
Yeah. No, I love it. So the hierarchy is okay to have the aesthetical wants and then move it down. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah, I would say if that's important to you, because some people it's not. It's like, yeah, if that's important to you, I think it is okay to be like really like set in like, yeah, I'm really clear that's what I want. Some people, it could be a question of like, is that a feature or a benefit? You know, so to really question, is that a feature or is that a real thing that you're wanting? Mm-hmm. And then like, yeah, we've heard that. That's one thing as well with the list. You can do what Antia mentioned is you can divide it into 4 sections if you really want to, like the must-haves, and then would be like the like-to-haves, and then be like the don't wants, and then the deal breakers. So you're gonna get really clear on exactly like the most important thing. So
brilliant. I'd say a lot of people probably lead with deal breaker as well, don't they? They don't really keep their eyes open.
Yeah, because if you're just clear on what you don't want, then the universe is just say, well, whatever. Then I guess we'll just give you something, you know, something off the scrap table. That's that's totally matching your
we'll just keep testing that for you. Is that definitely what you don't want? Here's some more of that.
Yeah, sure.
And you know, one thing that I always tell my women, Simon, is that just go shopping. You know, I think so many women, when they go on dates, they just say that, is he the one, right? But instead of saying, okay, I love the humor of Simon, you know, and I love I don't know, whatever, not the wittiness, that's kind of like the same thing, but maybe some intellectual stimulation from Mark, and like, I love this one. And so she just makes sort of a list, and she knows how that experience is like with every man, right? So she goes shopping for attributes, like literally through experience and not through sitting at home at her desk and thinking like, and I think you should make 6 figures, and I think you should No, it's not about that, you know. So that's what is also coming from, that clarity comes through shopping. I did a lot of shopping, a lot of first dates, hundreds.
Yeah, it's like
being
trial.
very clear.
Taking it on a trial.
Yeah, taking on a trial
period.
You see, I love this. I love this advice coming from people at your level, because I think some people need that permission slip. I think some people get guilty from going on too many dates. I think there's still quite a lot of social conditioning around those sorts of things. So it's great to hear that. You know what? It's okay to go and do that.
I really highly recommend having a spreadsheet. We have our clients have like a dating tracker what they liked, what they didn't like, what was surprising, who invested more time. And so
Yeah.
they just really have this, like, what were the attributes they liked and so on and so forth, right? So just have that, like, at a glance for yourself.
Incredible.
You know, take it serious, but also have fun.
Brilliant. I suppose another aspect of this is as well, like, I'm just again thinking of conversations that I'm having around kind of like our men's circle or socials. If you've got your unicorn list, not unicorn, let's not call it that, like you've got this amazing list of the person. But for example, if you're going to go and fish for this big mystical whale in the same old swimming pools or something like that, you've really got to be really aware of where you're going to find or where you're going out and placing yourselves into those environments as well, haven't you? I presume environment's a big one, because if you're the person you were before you've done this work and you're going to the same places with the same people at the same times, around the same environments, the same energy, so to speak, you're probably not going to find it there. So I presume a lot of the time it's uprooting yourself and putting yourself into different situations, scenarios, and finding where those values would lie, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of that. I love that, what you said, the metaphor there is uprooting, exactly it. It's like, I say, like, you're like a seed. Think of yourself as like a seed, and what's the best soil to plant yourself in where you're going to create that vision that you have. And one exercise that I did, and so I have my clients do, is really write up that list of what you want in your ideal person, and then brainstorm, where do you think this kind of person is hanging out? What kind of events are they going to? What is their lifestyle like? What places are they going on the weekends? What do they like to do for fun? And really think about that. Sit down and think about, like, if you were them, like, what are you doing on your free time? What kind of groups are you part of? What kind of events do you go to? And just make that list. Whatever you can think of, just make that list. Whatever you think they might be doing, where they're going, the type of values that you're wanting, like maybe that if you want somebody who's more intellectual, maybe they are going to like more seminars and workshops. So you just write that all out. And then you look and you try to cross-reference that with things that you might actually be interested in checking out and doing. And you just go check them out. And you think about it as, like, what I recommend is do it like a 90-day research project, right? Where you're like a scientist, or you're like an Indiana Jones, going out and just exploring and adventuring into different groups and different events that you've maybe never gone to before, and just seeing what it's like, and just taking note and writing it out, and maybe go once or twice to just get a really good feel for it. And if you don't like it, you don't have to go back again. But now at least you know, and you've expanded your horizons. And then after that 90-day period, you're pretty much set for the rest of, your life, essentially, of like what kind of places you can go and meet those kind of people you're interested in, both for dating and also just for a social life or your business even.
Yeah, I totally get this. As well, I've kind of been that guy as well. But I think from a different point of view, it's like sometimes people's only option is to go out to a club. And it's like, maybe the guy you're looking for isn't the one who's blowing bottles of Grey Goose, and he's actually the one who's at home working all hours, working on his dream, his passion, or writing that book. So you've really got to kind of think outside your box and put the shoes on of the person who you do want in your life, I'm guessing. So,
and at the same time, I do think it comes down to your alignment, right? Because I remember when I was aligned, when I shut down my online dating account, and I was literally saying, okay, universe, like,
that's a big step.
Where the heck is the man supposed to come from now, Like, remember, I did like hundreds of first dates and whatever, right? And so I went to the grocery store, and I came out of the grocery store, and I had a note behind my windshield wiper from a guy who had just seen me, like, go into the grocery store. And so I think, to me, that was like such a sign. I met another guy in traffic. LA, there's always traffic, we were stuck in a one-on-one for half an hour. And driving parallel to each other. So I always tell my women, like, yes, it is environment to some extent, but it's also about alignment. Yep. When you are aligned, when you know what you want, when you are aligned to your values, when you're unapologetic to it, like, you literally can meet a man, like, literally everywhere. I had like one client, and the guy was running after her from a grocery store, because like they were in line together, but he had to get his groceries first, and met her like just in time, right before she left the parking lot. So, so there are those stories, right? So I definitely invite everyone to not get so caught up, and to trust that you get sort of like this inkling. When I met Brody at our spiritual discussion group, it wasn't like because I'm like, oh, I'm sure I'm going to meet a guy at a spiritual discussion group. I was at the beach, and I don't know, somehow I was drawn to go to meetup.com. I don't know why, somebody told me to go to meetup.com. And then I saw, oh, this meeting is going on. Oh, that sounds kind of cool. It's in 2 hours. I can make that from the beach back to Honolulu, right? And so that's how it's going to happen. It's like taking one step at a time, and not being so like pre-planned and having all those things on your calendar, that's not how it's going to work. Well, shall we talk about communication real quick? Because when it comes to vulnerability, I think one thing that I always see is my women always want men to be vulnerable. And so, but the problem is they're not vulnerable themselves. And so when I met Brody, when we started dating, like I told him when I wanted to manipulate him, you know what I mean? Like, so I was like, darn, you know, because I wanted to sabotage, I wanted to guilt trip him, and I was like, oh, now our integrity of our relationship is compromised. Now I need to tell him because what I think, what I say, and what I do needs to be in alignment. So I'm like, oh, what do you want to do? So I like, well, and I said, hey, babe, you know, I just wanted to manipulate you. I mean, my ego wanted to manipulate you, and then he was like laughing, and he said, really? How did you want to do that? And so I do encourage women to be really honest. You know, when that part comes on, it's like, you know, I need to stay in control. I need to stay in power. I need to keep him on a leash. That's all the stuff I learned from my mom, by the way. Great visuals, you know, to have a long relationship. And to really break through that, you know, I think that's super important.
We always say that, don't they? Like vulnerability, it's probably the thing that most people are preventing themselves from getting hurt from, is also the thing that's stopping them getting what deep down they really want. So I think this is why the vulnerability card is such a big thing, not just in relationships as well. I think it's just in everyday life as well.
Yeah.
So
totally.
Obviously, we've spoke. I'd love to speak more about this because I do believe that vulnerability is one of the big things. Where would you start with someone with that? I presume is one of the biggest parts of getting someone to realize that they are scared or they are fearful, or it's time to drop the armor.
Yeah. Well, like I said, so the first pillar is like really saying, okay, is it more the inflation or the deflation you're afraid of? So it's more the anger or the sadness, right? So what are you judging more inside of yourself? So that's sort of like the beginning point. And then they say, well, it's more like, you know, I don't want to be helpless, or I don't want to be powerless, or anything like that. And so I work with them to develop a positive relationship to it. And then also when they show up to the date, to just say what's present right now, you know, versus like going into performance. I called it like functioning over feeling. It's really more about like going into the feeling first, like, wow, yeah, you know, today was an interesting day, you know what I mean? Versus like, oh, how are you? You know, and like you're not even in your body and you're not even there, you're not even connecting with the guy, right? Versus just like, wow, just like, give me a second, you know what I mean? Like, let me just sit down, you know, let me just like be present for a second, right? Like, so to just be honest, you know, that's what I always like, because then that invites the men to be like, oh, you know what? Like, I also didn't have like the best day today, or sure, you know what I mean? Like, and so he'll feel himself more the more embodied she is.
Yeah.
Because she allows herself to feel. And he picks that up because mirror neurons, monkey see and monkey do. Right? That's true, man. How you receive that when a woman is in her body.
How I receive that?
Mm-hmm. As a man.
Yeah, it's good.
No, but I mean, like, what is sort of like the interpretation?
The interpretation?
Yeah.
Yeah, when a woman's vulnerable, it brings up that protective instinct too, to want to protect her and to be the hero for her. Like, wow, you entrusted me with this. And it's also psychologically, people are more likely to trust you when you show that you trust them. So by being vulnerable, you're showing trust, which typically people want to reciprocate that. And so it strengthens bonds in that way. But I think it really goes down to facing fears. Like, I think vulnerability is about your own relationship to fear and how willing you are to face your fears and run towards the fears. Like, as Joseph Campbell says, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. The cave you most fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. So actually, like, seeking out that fear rather than running from it, and being willing to do those things that feel uncomfortable and be more yourself when typically you wouldn't, because you're afraid of getting rejected.
I think as well with this as well, isn't it? It's intimacy. So into me, I see. So the biggest thing for the majority of people is actually to be seen. But if you're going around the world with shadows or parts of yourself that aren't illuminated or hidden, you'll never truly be seen. So you'll never expose yourself for it, really, will you? So there's always something that's holding you back or getting the full effects of it, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also about like setting boundaries too. So for lots of women, especially after any worthiness and complexes, right? Like they never say no, right? And
Yeah.
they're like, well, if I say no, he's gonna leave me. So for them, this can be the most vulnerable act that they could ever do. Is actually say, oh, actually, I don't agree with you, or even to say, actually, I don't like red wine. So just something simple like that, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be like a massive like rejection, so to say, right? But yeah, I think that's like really important. At the same time, understanding like, if you're afraid to set boundaries, it's because you're afraid that somebody else is going to feel so rejected. So then I also recommend them doing a rejection challenge and actually seeking out rejection. So having like both sides, you know what I mean? If I'm good to
Yeah.
receiving rejection and have a positive relationship to it, then I'm also not afraid to say no, that
Yeah.
somebody else may feel rejected.
This is brilliant. I'd love to speak to you a bit more about this. So obviously when people have been in the dating world, or maybe they found something that they're willing to commit to, I know I've heard a couple of my friends who are in a similar line of work speak about this, and it just fascinates me, is when maybe something is coming together and it's starting to work and you've got that feeling like, do you know what? I don't quite know what it is, but I feel like I can commit towards this. It's like when it's in those early stages of growth, like a lot of the time people think they've got something and the fear of it means they'll grasp onto it too much and they can kill it. So I'd love to know from your guys' experience and the people who you work with. I know you've helped thousands of people all over the world. Like when you've kind of given yourself that permission slip to commit, to expose yourself, to be seen, to lower down the armor. Or I know, Brody, you use an amazing analogy, and it's something I've used before in a speaking gig, of the golden Buddha. So when you've allowed yourself to be exposed into that early stages, how would you then say like the best way to go around nurturing it is? Is it just to let it be like the relationship and not try and grab onto it too much? Because I know a lot of people get through the first door, which is I might have found the person, but then crush it trying to get to the second or the third door. And I think you two would be amazing people to speak about this.
Yeah. So one of my favorite phrases that I latched onto when I was in my journey that I heard from, I believe it was Wayne Dyer, which is commit to the process, but detach from the outcome.
I love that.
And yeah, that was one of the most powerful things for me. I think one of the most powerful things I learned in my journey, and the practice of that, which is about you take all that energy that wants to hold on, that wants to grasp and say like, yes, I finally got it. This is going to be it. This is the person. And like taking that anxiety and that like desire that comes with that, which is really a Buddhist practice. It's like putting that energy and that desire instead. Well, actually, it's not Buddhist, because it's actually taking that energy and desire and putting it into the process of just showing up, practicing things that you've learned, being authentic, communicating, and working on yourself, and putting all that energy into that process, and just trusting that when you put that energy in the process and you let go of caring whether the person's going to leave you or not, whether it's going to work out or not, just keep focusing on the process, showing up, doing your thing as best you can, then the results generally will be as optimized as possible. I mean, that's when you create the great results, because you're not attached to them. You're not letting them, like you're not crushing the egg, like you said. So yeah, the process is where it's all about. And yeah, that was huge for me.
That reminds me of there's a Buddhist story or a Buddhist principle. I was over in Thailand living before this, and I've spent a lot of time in different cultures and gone and lived with those guys and stuff like that. And I can remember one of them said to me, if a butterfly floats and it comes and lands on your hand, you've got one of three choices that most people do. They'll either grab onto it really quick and they'll kill it immediately, or they'll slowly try and capture it, where the butterfly is always looking for holes to escape and run away, or they'll simply just put up the other hand to shield it from the wind. Just let it be and add value to its life. And I love how it's kind of like falls in line with that. Just trust the process, add value where you can, and just let it grow and be.
Yeah, I mean, we were like how that looks like in our relationship too. Like when we met each other, we were very casual for a while. I mean, we didn't even become exclusive for 3 months. And even that night, even though I said, "You're the girl from my story," I didn't like make it a huge deal. It was almost like I just treated it like, "Oh, that's interesting. I attracted exactly what I wanted. How interesting. That's pretty cool." But I didn't be like, yes, I got it. Oh my gosh, are you gonna marry me? We should get married tomorrow. Like, let's do this. Like, I finally
Bend the knee.
Yeah, exactly. I was just like, oh wow, this is cool. Okay, cool. Let's see where this goes. Let's see how this develops. So it's like that attitude of like, it's just the usual. That's another thing I teach. We teach our clients is like when something great happens, you say, oh, it's just usual. It's like not putting it on such a pedestal, right? The experience, not putting the experience on a pedestal is like, oh yeah, that's just normal for me. That happens all the time. Of course, he called me back. Of course, he texted me back. Of course, we had another amazing date. Of course, he asked me out on the second date. It's like, of course, we have a great relationship because it's just the usual. Why wouldn't it be that way? So it's like that kind of approach towards life and towards your love life is just like, when good things happen, that's normal. And when bad things happen, it's like, wow, that's strange. Like, why did that happen? That never happens. That's totally unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another approach towards it. That's, I think, a really good kind of mental hack.
Brilliant. Love it.
And I think like from a women's perspective, I mean, I work more with anxious attachment styles, so anxious ambivalent attachment styles, and they just like latch on much faster, right? And what the problem is that they have sort of this profile of what they want, and then they just project it onto you. So maybe they saw like 3 traits of that profile in you, right? They're like, oh my God, that's it. And then they just fill in all the blanks, and they just generalize, and they just delete the rest, you know what I mean? And just throw the rest into like, they just know maybe 2 archetypes, and they don't know the other 4, but it doesn't matter, you're it. They're wondering what their last name sounds behind your first name and all of that, And so so I always tell my women, just like, be careful. Is it an interpretation when you go on a date, or is it actually what happened, right? So if I go on a date and I say, wow, this guy was so interested in me and we were like flirting, were you? How do you know that? You know what I mean? Like, that's an interpretation. You don't know that, right? So I always invite them to sort of like almost like strip the experience, like the story from the experience, and just really see what was the raw experience. Okay, you spent like 2 hours together, you had a coffee, you laughed together. And it's just almost like bare bones, you know what I mean? And then just slowly build from there. And then the other piece also is what I always tell my women is, when we project something on, it's like it's a shadow on a wall, right? So we know it's just one-dimensional. Somewhere unconsciously we know that. And then the more we know that, the more we want it to be true, because we know it's not true yet, so we become more attached. So we're like, why not just say right away, it's a shadow. Let's just enjoy it for what it is. It's not a 3D person. Right? And so I always tell my women more, just say like, oh, what else do I not know? Versus like going into, oh, I know all this about this guy and he's great. I'm sure he's going to have great family and great everything. And he's going to be a great dad. It's like, what do I not know? That's why actually the archetype map helps.
Yeah.
Because I say, yeah, so 5 literally just seem like a little boy and maybe the warrior, but I have no idea if he's spiritually growing. I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know how he's in everyday life being a king, if he knows his direction. And so I ask more questions, be like a little bit more, I don't want to say critical, but just like more space.
Well, that's a good point, because it's like there's a tendency to want to fill in the gaps, right? To want to like, you get a couple words on a page and you want to like write the whole novel. And so it's like,
Oh my God.
I've done this straight up.
Yeah. Well, so that's a big practice. It's similar to like a lot of things we've been talking about it, but it's like feeling that part of you that wants to fill it in, and just like being okay with the tension and being okay with the uncomfort of not like the open loop, right? Being okay with an open loop. Like, you don't have to close it, because that's what the brain's trying to do, is it's trying to get certainty. It's trying to say, oh, it must be like this, and this, and now I know, okay, great, this is how it is, even though that's still just a fantasy. But the brain wants to close that loop and wants to hold on to something. So it's like being willing to be in that free fall, right? Where you don't know where the relationship is going. You don't exactly know who this person is. It's like there's a lot of gray zone, there's a lot of unknown, there's a lot of openness, and that's okay. And so it's like, just like breathing into that unknowingness and the uncertaintiness, and being okay with it, and starting to love that, like falling in love with the uncertainty. That's part of committing to the process and detaching from the outcome as well.
It's such a big thing as well, isn't it? As like now with what's going on in the world is a prime example. The unknowingness is causing so many people to lose their shit.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, if you throw that into kind of like an intimate area of relationships, it's like, oh, that's a big move.
Exactly, because also what the funny thing is, we would rather, like, when our brains do that, it's like we would rather have certainty that everything's shit and they're gonna break up with us and the world's going to shit and it's all gonna be over soon, we'd rather have that certainty than not knowing, right? Like that's what a lot of singles we work with would do. That they would rather know that the guy's not interested or know that the relationship isn't going anywhere and have that certainty rather than being in the unknown of not knowing yet if it's going to go anywhere, if it's the person, if this is the one or not. And so it's like being willing to not know and have that be okay and letting it unfold. So it's letting go of that need for certainty. And
is that kind of like a control practice? Like be okay
exactly.
not having to control everything and just letting it be and take its own organic path?
Yeah, I almost feel like it's like a planet orbiting around you, right? Just let it orbit. You know what I mean? But instead, it's like what you said with the butterfly. You just want to pull it in.
Yeah.
So I feel like I just tell my women, just imagine it's just like flowing in front of you, but there's still space. And then the other piece also is to really see, well, why do I think Simon is the one, right? It's like, okay, so in his presence, I feel like level 10, whatever, you know what I mean? Appreciation or a level 10 of this or that, right? And I was like, okay, well, how can you create that for yourself? You know? Or when have you experienced that in the past? Maybe you can even recreate it from your past or not. You have to create it by yourself. Like grab your girlfriends and be like, hey, so I really want to recreate this for myself. How can we do that? Because that was a huge breakthrough for me when I turned down, a guy who, he wanted to go sailing with me. And it was Sunday and all the girls wanted to go with him and all of that. And I knew if I say yes now, I'm going to be totally codependent again, right? Like I have to be able to create that same by myself. And needless to say, he became crazy about me because I turned him down and I said, I need to spend an Antia day. And he's like, an Antia day? We're going sailing, girlfriend. You know what I mean? What's better than this? It's a Sunday. You know what I mean? But because from that moment on, I chose him, I no longer needed him. And I think that's why all those dating phases are breaking down, because like it goes so much into I need you, right? Like but you can't choose anyone if you need them. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah, there's an old saying they say. One of my spiritual teachers, his name's Anthony DeMello. He talks about
yeah.
You know Anthony DeMello?
Yeah. I know of him. I know of his work. I don't know him to go for a beer.
Yeah, he's great. But one of the things he said is if you need somebody, you actually can't love them. Mm-hmm. Because as soon as you need somebody for your happiness, for your sense of whatever, love, connection,
certainty,
the relationship becomes transactional. At this point, it becomes an exchange. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to be with you in exchange for my happiness, in exchange for this feeling of love. And that's transactional. He said that's the opposite of love. And so the only way you can actually love somebody is you can't need them for anything. Yeah. You have to let them be and be with you and enjoy their company, but not need them for anything. That's true love, because now you're with them out of choice and not out of need. It's not a transaction anymore.
Yeah, I see in England, I don't know if you've heard this in America, but a lot of the time I've seen it in groups where people go like, oh, he completes me. I'm like, okay, so problem. Yeah. We have a problem now. Yeah.
I can't live without you, I can't breathe without you, like all those love songs. I mean, really, it's so much in our culture, this whole invitation to be like codependent, right? I can't be independent. And I think that's what Brody and I would talk about all the time is interdependence. So making sure you always have that individual identity and the couple identity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You always need to have both.
Yeah, or like the analogy is like, standing next to each other rather than leaning on each other or like far away from each other, pulled away. It's just like being able to be next to each other, just two people standing next to each other holding hands, but not that leaningness, not the entanglement, right?
Yeah.
This is you complete me. That's what you completely looks like. But this is like healthy interdependence. And this is independence. This is two single people. Mm-hmm. So it's that balance. It's key.
Perfect. Absolutely love this. I'd love to know again from your guys. I'm going to start coming into this a little bit more and rounding it up. Is there kind of like a do and don't list? So for our listeners, this is more predominantly towards the single people in this audience. Do you guys have like a do and don't? Is it like a red flag, like intuition's right? Is there any form of like these are your must do's and must don't kind of like
just in dating in dating in general?
Yeah, just for people getting into it. So for people coming into the door, people putting themselves out there, people willing to expose those parts of themselves and uncover those shadows, but they're new to the whole dating field.
I mean, it's like, okay, we can just go with
You want to do
communication, I
do's
guess.
and I do
Like, so,
don'ts?
oh, what about I do don'ts? Because I have so many don'ts
Okay,
when it
you
comes
do
to
the
communication.
don'ts.
So one don't about communication is like, don't write novels when you text, right? Like, don't write more than what the guy writes. Like, to stay within proportion, right?
Or as
Also,
we like to say, your phone should only be used as an appointment setting device. So really try to avoid having long conversations on the phone. The best thing is meeting in person. Yeah, that's a little hard right now.
I mean, yeah.
But if you can't do that, you can at least meet on Zoom, you know? You
Yeah.
meet on Skype like we're doing here.
Yeah.
I was going to say, there's nothing worse than getting a huge essay as well. It's like, oh.
It's like, it's seriously, are you reading? I'm not going to even read that to the end when my women sent me something. I'm sorry, I need 3 days to get back to you. You know what I mean? Because like, that's going to take me some patience to read for all of that. I said, well, this is really bad news, okay, because you're paying me. It takes me 3 days. So can you imagine a guy who like, there's nothing in it for him and he's supposed to read for all this. So that's one. And also, don't talk about your ex, right? So we're watching sometimes those reality TV shows. And we always seem like those women are talking about the ex, and I'm like, what is a guy supposed to do with that? Or vice versa, when a guy talks about his ex, you know what I mean? I'm like, well, if you badmouth them, then I need to lose respect for you because you dated them, you chose them at some point, you know. So what does that tell me about you? You know, if you badmouth them. And if you tell me great things about them, then well, why are we on a date? You know, maybe you should try to get back together with her. So I just don't think, like, especially in the beginning stages, this is ever a good idea. Also, don't drink too much. You know, it's like a huge one. Like, people overdrink.
Everyone's been guilty of that at some stage.
Well, there's actually a couple of problems, right? So, like, in a softer case, it's just like, yeah, you loosen up, but you're not going to be like that afterwards. So it's not sustainable, right? So I'm always feeling like, I don't know, I have a certain experience with Simon, but then once we're not out, he's totally different. He's like distant and he's like almost a little stiff and like, I don't know what's going on, right? So I have like those mixed messages. And then worst cases, of course, like especially for women, like sleeping with guys too early and doing things they regret, right? And maybe talking about things that they shouldn't talk about, just really losing everything, you know?
Just on that note, I'd love to clear this up from, again, your guys' profession. Is there a certain point or a do or a green flag that's like, this is the right time to do that?
To do what?
To sleep with a partner early into those stages? Because a lot of time there's so many mixed messages. People, what would you... Well, I'd love to know what you guys say on this.
Oh, Brody has like a very, very clear on that.
I mean, for me, it's a little different if we're talking about for women or for men.
Well, let's just talk from a men's perspective.
No, but for women or for men.
Yeah.
For who?
But you can just start for men.
For men?
Yeah. So like that is a really
are there more women or men listening to your podcast? You know,
female 70%, male 30%.
Okay, got it. I'll start for women first. So what I recommend for women is that as best as you can, avoid having sex until you're in exclusivity agreement. And that just goes back to biology. Biologically, a lot of women we coach are more anxious attachment styles. So their anxiety just gets more activated after you've slept with men. It's biologically because you may be carrying his child and all that, even though we know that's, we have protection these days. But so in order to prevent a woman getting obsessed over a guy and getting too anxious too fast, I recommend not doing really anything sexual until you had an exclusivity agreement of some kind. Like we're going to be sleeping together exclusively if this happens, until of course you may break it up at some point, but at least to have that agreement while you're doing that. That'll just avoid a lot of conflict. So that's why I recommend to women. And with men, I'd say, it's different for guys because with guys, if you sleep with a woman, she's actually more likely to now be connected to you. I mean, that's why it's kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, it kind of works in favor of guys, and I'm a big fan of evolutionary psychology. I'm reading a book right now about chimps. And so I love to look at the evolutionary, reasons behind things. And so evolutionarily, it works more in favor of men than it does for women to have sex early on. I mean, that's just the way it is. So for guys, it's kind of in a guy's benefit to sleep sooner rather than later with a woman. For women, it's kind of the reverse. So that's where, that's a kind of a dance we have to play as relations between the genders, as we've seen it play out throughout human history. But
what are some of the green flags that the woman is sending, that the man knows that she's ready?
The green flags that a woman is sending and a man knows she's ready.
You have your system for that.
Yeah, so if you want to sleep with a man as a woman, some green flags a woman would send would be like making out with him. I mean, what kind of green flags? This is pretty obvious. Playing with your hair.
Well, usually you have like your whole.
Yeah, but there's more women listening, so we don't have to go on the whole pickup thing.
That's not about pickup. It's about sensory acuity. No, Brody has like this whole system, and I actually really love that. And it's really having this sensory acuity to women as a man. And just really, and I think it's actually safe for women to hear that, because it's very respectful to women. And it's really about like feeling, oh, she's leaning in, right? And then she's leaning in. Okay, that's the next open body language. Then what's the next step, right? So versus like, I'm just going in, or I'm just coercing her, or anything like that so many women are like afraid of, right?
Yeah.
That have trust issues.
Yeah, so that's like one thing I recommend for men is do what's called the KISS test. Oh. So have you heard of that?
No.
Okay. So the KISS test is basically, I'll show you right now. It'd be like when you're talking with a girl and you basically just like start like something small, like you start playing with her hair with your fingers. And you just start doing that while you're talking, and notice how she reacts to that, right? It's like a test, right? You're testing the waters to see how she reacts. Does she give you, like you were saying earlier, green lights, yellow lights, or red lights? Is she giving you a green light, like she likes it? Does she start smiling a little bit more when you did that? Did she lean in a little bit? Or was she kind of like straightening her back, kind of like pulling away a little bit, So it's like, rather than going in for the kiss, like guys sometimes will just go straight in for the kiss, but if they're not sure, you kind of want to test the waters a little bit, right? So now you're getting a sense for where's a good, is she ready for that, right?
It's a good baseline.
Yeah, and if she likes the hair touch, then you can like graduate to like kind of maybe massaging the back of her neck a little bit, or the back of her head, and if she's liking that, then you can go in for the kiss. So it's like you're kind of taking more baby steps, right? So
I wish the younger version of myself knew that. You would have saved him a few awkward situations. That's awesome. So yeah, flipping it back. So is there any more do's, don'ts on that sort of stuff? Thank you for covering that as well. I've always wanted to kind of touch up on that, but it's never really come up in any of the conversations we've had in the past. So to round that up, it's would you say it's just more communications, isn't it?
Well, what I'll say is for some more do's is I recommend date multiple people at the same time. This really goes for men and women, but especially for women. I recommend dating multiple people, which is kind of a paradox, right? I said don't sleep until you're exclusive, but then here I'm saying date multiple men, especially as a woman, or since most women are listening. But date multiple people at the same time, which that means is if you've seen the show The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, you see there's a psychology that happens when somebody feels like when you feel like you're being competed over, you tend to be feeling more confident. You tend to be knowing more you're in the prize. And also it makes you set it up to where you don't get as easily into that desperate mode. And it's kind of common sense in some ways, but some people are like shocked I've heard some people be shocked when like, what? No, don't date multiple people at the same time. Like, what are you they're going to think you're a slut or something like that. It's like, no, you're not sleeping with multiple people. Just like create the situation where you are the bachelor or the bachelorette, right? You want to create that situation by dating multiple people. And then also you're getting more clear on who you actually want to be with. And you're not just jumping at the first person who seems to like you, right? So it's like set it up in your favor and increase your options.
I would say another do is have like shorter phone conversations. So I see a lot of that. Maybe that's a don't have long phone conversations. Don't be like, until your phone like battery dies and everything dies, right? So including chemistry, because like what happens is your research really shows, right? Like, our oxytocin level rises through the roof, right? The more we talk, but for men, it's the opposite, right? Like there's like she drops tremendously, and I feel like they need to kill something afterwards, right? So, and that almost like neutralizes the whole situation. The man wants to get away, the woman feels that she takes personal, and so on. So just keep it at like I always say, 20 minutes, plenty. You know what I mean? Especially like the first phone conversations, and then it's like more. It's like an appetizer. It's like an ahi tuna. You don't stuff yourself like a turkey on Thanksgiving, and then you feel sick, right? And you lay there for 3 hours and can't even move. So don't do that. Like don't have like too long of a phone conversations, especially if you're an anxious attachment style. And you know that you're an anxious attachment style if you attract men who avoid. So just tell me who you attract and I'll tell you who you are.
Meaning men who pull away.
Men who pull away, who make you all those empty promises. There's no follow through.
I was going to say that's a big thing. The flaky startup, the one who's always lingering but never committing or wanting to meet.
Or the helicoptering, the helicoptering, the zombieing, they leave and then they come back, which is even worse than ghosting, you know what I mean? At least when they ghost, they're gone. So yeah, exactly. But if you just tend to experience a lot of inconsistency in dating, you're probably more on the anxious side. If you're on the receiving end of that, then you're definitely more on the anxious side, and if you feel like, and then don't ask a man where you're standing every week. That's the other thing too. It's like, so what do you think? How's it going? You know what I mean? Like, so are you dating other people? It's just so cringy. You know what I mean? It's like, no, just like have fun. And just, you don't even know if you want to continue dating this guy. So why would you even care if he's dating other women? It just makes it awkward,
Yeah. You got anything else you want to throw into that? Is there, I was going to say this conversation could go on for so long.
Communication, maybe one more good one for communication. For communication, I would say no early on.
Set boundaries early on.
Set boundaries. Well, I say a lot of actually appreciation and acknowledgement is huge. So as a do, it's like you want to reward the behavior you want to see more of. So a lot of people use punishment as a way to try to control somebody. Like if they're saying things that they don't like, or they're being too sexually suggestive, or they're not talking enough, then they'll just pull away, or they'll say, okay, I got to go home tonight, or they'll just withdraw a little bit. So rather than punishing a guy, you want to reward him for what he's doing that you like. And one of the best rewards you can give to a man, of course, it depends on his love language, but most men, based again on evolution, men want to make women happy, and we feel good when we know that women like us, are we doing a good job? So one of the best things you can do to appreciate someone is actually say what you like. When they do something you like, if they open the door for you, say, oh, thank you so much. That's so sexy when a man is opening the door for me. Or I love it when men are opening up and being vulnerable. I so appreciate that you shared that. Or wow, you got really big. I love your shoulders. They're so big and broad. It's sexy. So anything that you're admiring about him, just let him know, especially about things he's doing, because you're just man training, right? You're just training your behavior. You're rewarding the behavior you want to see.
That's awesome. Do you think, I know you guys just touched upon the love languages then, do you think it's vitally important that people who are in this field or whatnot kind of know which ones they are? Do you think that would save a lot of problems?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think the benefit of learning the love languages is that you become more aware about the unique individual you're dealing with, and you also stop projecting your own stuff onto the other person. I think that's the main benefit of learning about the love languages, is you realize not everyone's like you. Just because you may appreciate, when somebody gives you a gift, that doesn't mean everyone's like that. And also to realize that everyone's unique, and this man is not different, is going to be different than the other man, and to look at what makes him different. How is he different? How might you need to interact with him differently to have a great interaction rather than with somebody else? So I think that's the main value of it. And of course, once you do know someone's love language, it's a great way to divvy out those rewards to help create the relationship. Or as B.F. Skinner, the psychologist, he actually calls it reinforcement. It's like you're reinforcing that positivity so that you're really creating a relationship that works, rather than also what a lot of people don't realize is that they're actually rewarding behavior when they start drama or start an argument. An argument is actually a form of reward, because what is it? It's quality time. It's actually quality time. When you're arguing with somebody, you're focused on the person, you're spending time with that person, you're going back and forth. And if that's their love language, then you're actually telling them, hey, this is a good thing. When we're arguing, that's good. Let's cause more situations to argue about. And so you got to be very careful about what you're rewarding, and knowing the person, knowing the love languages can help you to be aware to actually make sure you're not rewarding the things that you don't want to see more of, and make sure you're not subconsciously accidentally creating bad scenarios that you don't want, or rewarding him when he pulls away by now you're texting him all the time, and that's actually a reward because now you're giving him that more of that attention. It's like, oh, maybe I should pull away some more. Maybe she'll chase me some more. It can become a very sad downward spiral.
Oh. I've got to ask this. Like, you two, for me, embody what you do. I've just been sat here watching you both for an hour and bang on 15 minutes, and both the look that you give each other when each other speak, and it's amazing. I'd love to know for you, because obviously you live the work in which you preach and speak about, and it's very evident from what I'm seeing right now, is what do you do as a practice to make you two show up as a powerhouse couple? Because it's very evident to me that you two are that.
Oh.
Well, we have like our couple VIP days where we check in with each other. We're going through our archetypes, we rank them. And so we really see like, oh, where's your king this week? Okay, it's like a level 5, or like, where's your warrior? Oh, 8. Okay. And then we really see, so what does that part need? And I think Brody and I, we're both always aware of like creating like this interdependent part we talked about before. So,
yeah,
Brody likes to go on this like recharge retreats, so I know like so many friends who have never even spent like a minute apart from their partner, other than work, right? And so for them to be like, wait, your husband is going on a man's retreat for like 3 days in North Carolina, and like you're okay with that? And I'm like, yeah, that's totally fine. So I think we're always like pushing our edge. We did a shadow ceremony the night before our wedding, which is we acknowledge each other. Do you know what that is? A shadow ceremony?
I've got a rough idea. I'd love to know specifically on your end. What is that? Just to make sure I'm
it's
about
like
the right
acknowledging
thing.
each other's. It's acknowledging each other's fears, and then what we did was like we took the deepest one into our actual light ceremony. I mean, a normal wedding ceremony, basically, and and shared that in front of everyone. Mine was not being good enough, the fear of not being good enough, and his was being trapped. And so we do that every year. So we're renewing our vows, and always add on a shadow vow every year because it changes, because we're evolving.
Or we just update it. We don't add them on because some of them change. Right.
We update it, yes. So it could be the same, could be different. But yeah, I would say like we're leading into the edge, and we appreciate each other very much. We're best friends. We're super attracted to each other 7 years later. So I think it's really, I think a lot of it is really me really waiting for the right person. I was single my whole life. And I think, yes, we have a really amazing foundation, and there are some practices we do, but I think also, some of it was just there from day one.
So would you say checking in, knowing what you want, communicating, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to expose the shadows of which are in there, or to uncover them, and then also giving yourself spaces individually to grow individually, and then come together to grow mutually?
Yeah, totally. And I think the other thing before you talk, is also this sort of like, I think there's space for us to like call each other out without the other person, for the most part, not getting defensive. You said like many times, you're like,
Yeah, well, that's a practice.
Yeah.
But Brody was saying so many times, like just the level of awareness that we both have. So we both have our faults, of course we do. We both have our, shortcomings. But I think there's like always awareness around it on both sides. So we're never like, no, I just keep doing this and screw you, right? But like we're both working on whatever we know is a little bit more, I kill the seal, so to say, What else do you want to say, sweetie?
The last thing I'll just say is like really knowing how to manage conflict is huge. And we use a technique called open dialogue. And I use this a lot with her. Like when she gets upset, I'll ask her like, what are you feeling? Why are you feeling that way? And what do you want? Those are the 3 basic questions. And then really going deep to where she is. And then once I've heard her out, I'll share for me what I want, what I'm feeling, why I'm feeling that way, and what I want. And we really understand each other well, and then we can find a win-win. Usually, I believe that relationships are basically about constant negotiation, and like really constantly making sure both of you are getting your needs met and having to constantly manage expectations and agreements so that you are both, and being creative and finding new win-win solutions so you're both continually getting your needs met. And so it's a process. And if you don't have a practice around that, I feel it can get really sloppy, and it can get really toxic, and it can get just really bad for the relationship. So having a great practice around, like a solid practice around how to navigate conflict when it comes up, and you doing it often, I think is a big piece of it too. Huge piece.
The thing that I love about your guys' line of work, there's quite a few areas in life which I love looking at, but there's no real education. There's no solid, like, correct info. You're just literally thrown out into the big wide world. You've got to find your own feet. There's not a lot of role model relationships to really look at, or you don't really understand why certain things go the way that they go and to look at. So it really amazes me that your line of work, there's an education part to it which you don't really get taught in school. You don't get it taught anywhere. And I think it's very hard to kind of have those lighthouses to look up to and go, what makes them so special? Like, what are their practices? Why is that successful? Because success at the end of the day leaves clues, doesn't it? But how do you know what's actually good in the limelight is actually as good as what it looks like behind the scenes? You don't. So I think it's really amazing what you guys are doing. Just the last little couple of questions. If I was to give you a device where you could send a message to every single person in the entire world who is currently out there probably feeling like giving up, there's no hope, and you could just both speak one small individual message to those people, what would you give?
You want to start?
If I was to give a message, my message would probably be, I would say, in your dating, the most important thing is to enjoy yourself, have fun, and follow your bliss.
I love it.
I think that's what I would say.
I would say lean into your vulnerabilities. Your triggers are your treasures, and what you judge the most are your biggest gifts.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And then last but not least, guys, to you both, what would it mean to you, or what does it mean to you, to be able to lead and live a nourished life or a nourished relationship?
Yeah, I would say for me, what it means to live a nourished life or a nourished relationship would be I would say balance your archetypes. Balance your archetypes. Get into balance.
And for me, it's like really acknowledging the dark and the light, the shadow part inside of you. Just hold as much space and celebrate that as much as that light side, or that, welcome side of you.
Yeah. Awesome. Guys, I've loved having you on. This is one of these conversations I really wish I had another 3 hours with you with, because every time you speak, I'm like, oh my God, there's another alley I want to go and run down and speak to them about this topic. But look, it's been amazing to have you on. I know we've just done an hour and a half, but where can our audience find you? Is there anything that people can get involved in? I know from my own life that this is an area a lot of people struggle in. How can people reach out to you? Where can they get involved? How can they find out more about the amazing work that you're doing in the world?
Yeah, so for the women who are just really like, wow, Antia, you were really speaking my language, and I'm really struggling with vulnerability, boundaries, trust issues, all of it, control,
Anxious
attachment, like I always, future pays everything. I invite you to come on a Magnetize Your Man heart-to-heart chat with me, where we get crystal clear on what is getting in the way for you. What is the root? What's the internal dialogue? What's the past conflict inside of yourself that we need to really harmonize to get you back into alignment, so you easily and really almost like effortlessly attract the right man for you, how I attracted this amazing man. So for that, hop on over to magnetizeyourman.com. So very simple, magnetizeyourman.com, and you can grab a slot. Right now I have like 9 slots available. So yeah, they're going fast, but yeah, I would love to chat with you.
Completely complimentary for this interview too. So
Amazing.
that's our gift. Yeah, free heart-to-heart call with Antia. And yeah, so magnetizeyourman.com.
My YouTube channel.
Or find Antia on YouTube, Antia Boyd. That's probably the best thing.
Brilliant. So you guys mainly hang around online on, I think it's Facebook and YouTube.
Yes. Yeah, Facebook and YouTube. Yep.
Yeah, totally.
Antia Boyd.
Look, guys, before we round this, the links will all be in the show notes. Everything will be there for people to go and direct. But look, I want to acknowledge you both. Look, it's amazing to have you on. It's amazing to have new connections in my own life with you two. But more, again, just I said this before, this entire interview, I love it when you speak to teachers who embody the work in which they speak. And for me, this whole entire interview has reinforced that. So I want to acknowledge the work that you're doing. You're helping a lot of people find love. I think that's one of the biggest things that we're on this planet to do. So thank you for all that you do. And I can imagine this will be one of many interviews that we'll have on this show. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Simon.